and welcome to the How Not to Screw Up Your Kids podcast, the bucket emptying episodes. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Han, psychologist and parenting expert. So, pour yourself a cuppa, find a comfy seat, and enjoy the conversation. Today's bucket emptying episode is all about breathing technique. One specific breathing technique, I should say, and that's Take 10. Now, breathing techniques are a great way of unwinding and also quietening that busy brain. And the strategy that I'm going to teach is one that you can use equally as a parent and an adult, as well as also for young people. Now, in my experience, and it's been quite some time, 20 years that I've been working with young people, I've tried all sorts of breathing techniques, and young people often really struggle with this notion of focusing in the breath, anchoring themselves in the breath. And so the technique I'm going to show you, Take 10, is one that instead of asking them to focus on the breath itself and changing the breath, instead it asks them to focus on counting their breath. And in doing that, their focus and attention on counting helps achieve the exact same result as those really deep in breaths in, and then there's long exhales out. And I found this technique hits the sweet spot with so many young people of all ages, and as I say, is also really helpful for adults. So I've got a set of beads. So if you are listening to the podcast episode on the audio, whether that's through Apple's podcasts or through Spotify, it will probably be super helpful at some point if you log in and have a look at my YouTube channel, just so that you can see some of the visual for this. I think you'll find it really helpful, but I'll also talk you through it. Now, Take 10 as a strategy doesn't need a set of beads to be able to be used. I just find that when we first teach it, and when I first teach it, having a physical prop can be really helpful in a number of ways. The first way is it's incredibly tactile, and so that can be really helpful when they're first learning, because it really solidifies the technique. But it also acts as a brilliant visual prompt. It's present, it's around, and so you're much more likely to get them to practice Take 10 if they've got a reminder that's visual for themselves rather than us nagging, which is often how they see things, is this, that we're nagging rather than having that visual prompt. So you don't need the beads in order to use the particular technique, but I would encourage you, if you are able to create the beads and the set itself initially until they get used to using it, and then of course they'll then use it as a go-to. Just a recap before we go into the specifics and how you actually use it is that if we are encouraging young people to use breathing techniques in moments of extreme emotions or a super busy brain, they are never, ever going to use a breathing technique in a moment if they haven't practiced it when they are feeling calm and relaxed and found it to be beneficial. So it's really important that we introduce the concept of the Take 10 beads when they're in that state of sort of calm, when they're in that state of that kind of thinking, they're in this sort of prefrontal cortex, they're in their logical problem solving brain rather than in the middle of their emotional brain. If they've practiced it regularly, then of course they're much more likely to use it when they're in emotional brain, but they have to have practiced and used it first. So let me visualize for you, show you how the principles of Take 10 works. And in essence, what they're doing is they're counting their breath, but only counting their breath up to 10. And there's a reason why I've chosen 10. It's because we often go into autopilot. If I asked you to count, you could very easily find yourself, even if I asked you to count to 10, finding yourself at number 12, 13, 14, because it's habitual. We can be quite mindless at counting. When you say you're only going to count up to 10, then we have to be much more intentional. We have to be really present in that counting process. And when we're counting in breaths and out breaths. So just to explain how that would work, if you ask your child to lie on their back and to place either a cuddly or something soft on their chest as they breathe in and out, you would notice that the object itself would rise and fall as they breathe in and out. And we're simply counting the equivalent of the rise and the fall. They don't have to be on their back to do this. They can do it in any situation, but it's helping them get that visual prompt. Now, for those of you who are watching on the YouTube channel, you're going to see me now demonstrate it visually so that you can actually see it. Of course, I'm going to have to slightly exaggerate the point to make the point so that you can see. So you're going to imagine that I'm breathing now. So I would count as I breathe in. That would be 1. As I breathe out, that's 2. The next in-breath is 3. The next out-breath is 4. The next in-breath is 5. The next out-breath is 6. The next in-breath is 7. The next out-breath is 8. The next in-breath is 9. The next out-breath is 10. Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating. That isn't how it would work. What we're really trying to get our children to a state of is almost that diaphragmatical breathing rather than that chest breathing, which tends to be where they are when they're in that fight or flight, that adrenaline fueled stress breathing. So that's what they're doing. They're counting that breath. If you make a set of take 10 or worry beads, in essence what you're doing is you're taking a shoestring and you are going to thread on in total 30 beads, but you're going to thread them in blocks of 10. And as you will see with these blocks of 10, they're interspersed with these knots so that the beads can slide around. So we've got 10, 20, 30. And so when you've got a set of beads, what you can do instead of the counting on its own, you're counting and moving. So you would count with the in-breath, you would slide one across. With the out-breath, you'd slide the next. In-breath, out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. And then you'd get to the knot, and that sort of signifies you're on to the next set of 10. So it's really a great mechanism to use and a great tool to use at night time initially, because that's a sort of a relaxation time. Our children are already kind of trying to wind down. And what I usually find is children are not likely to use a strategy that they're not bought into. And so if they're practicing it at night time, particularly if they've got a busy brain, and they can see how helpful and effective it is in that moment, they're much more likely to use it again. And so just getting them to make a commitment to try it for 7 days, every single evening, and then report back how they feel and how helpful it has been. That's a really great one. And then, of course, after they've got used to using it in that tactile way, they can then use the Take 10 strategy without the beads at all and simply counting in their head. And it helps children go from that overwhelm of feeling or that overwhelm of busy brain back to this sort of going from this fight or flight to this rest and restore state. And we know that it takes 90 seconds to go from fight or flight to rest and restore, as long as we're utilizing a strategy for those 90 seconds. And Take 10 is a great one. So let me know how you get on. I'd be really keen. And also share some of the photographs of the Take 10 beads that you make. So I hope you found that episode helpful. If you did, I would be eternally grateful if you can share this episode with friends, colleagues, neighbours, and those in your community that may benefit from a little bit of extra support in helping quieten that busy brain and create that sense of calm. So until next time.